My name is Dr. Mark Griffith. I'm a senior program officer with United Nations Environment Program. I'm from Barbados, so I've had significant experience in working in the Caribbean. I've worked in Barbados, across the region, and internationally for the last 18 years or so. With respect to the issues that are being discussed at this conference, these are issues that I deal with on a day-to-day basis. So basically, I hope I can give some insight into what are some of the issues in the Caribbean that we need to address on the issues that we are looking at: sustainability, energy sustainability, and climate change. Now, in terms of energy in the region, as I think one of the points that came out in the discussion is that the region has, so to speak, the raw material. It has potential as far as renewable energies are concerned, but we haven't been able to realize that potential. Another issue that is very evident in the region is that energy cost is very high. And that is a major constraint, as was highlighted, other than probably 2 or 3 countries, with the exception being Trinidad and Tobago. Most of the countries depend on imported fossil fuels. So if you look at that as a context, one of the challenges I would say that we are faced with is our inability to really harness the potential we have in renewables. And I guess there are lots of issues or barriers to that, which were explained in the meeting. When you also look at the situation, you see that 1 or 2 countries, and let me use the case of Barbados, which has an experience of 30 years in solar water heating. But if you look at the region, again, that has not been integrated across the region in the way that one would want that to be. So it seemed to me that there's also a bottleneck there, both on the part of a country like Barbados, where enough has not been done in terms of research to move that technology forward or to improve the technology, and secondly, in terms of the exporting of that technology or the sharing of that technology to the other countries. So basically, I think that another issue that I think we want to allude to, it would appear as though another conclusion that we can draw from the discussion is that the potential is not necessarily situated where the markets are. So again, it would seem to me that there need to be some form of collaboration between countries in terms of moving that energy from one point to the next, from where the potential exists and where we have a market. Now, I would argue that one of the reasons that the region has not really maximized those benefits is because they're the institutional structures. We seem not to have, at a regional level, the types of structures that would enable us to maximize the opportunities that we have in terms of our resources, even though in the context of the revised Treaty of Chaguaramas, including the single market and economy, we talk about resources, regional resources, or the resources of the region. But we haven't gone the step, in my view, where we've put the structures in place to be able to maximize those resources for human well-being. So I think there are lots of issues that we need to address. I think now, a couple of months ago, the heads of government have agreed to the establishment of a renewable energy center. That might help. We have to wait and see. So I think there's some progress being made, but I think really, I say to a large extent, institutional issues, and obviously countries will argue financial. But I think we can overcome the financial issue if all the countries agree to finance the movement of these resources across the region. I think they have used other modalities already, say, for example, in financing the Caribbean Court of Justice. They've been able to support a bond collectively to finance the court, to give it its independence. I think the similar modality can be used to address some of the developmental issues. Somehow, we seem to be incapable of doing them. I think one of the issues that we were discussing over the past couple of days in the workshop is the role of parliamentarians. The role of parliamentarians from the point of view of the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals in terms of energy sustainability. And I really think they have a very critical role to play. However, when I look at the Caribbean, I would argue that we need to address the structural issues. Most of the issues that are discussed internationally, let's say, whether it be climate change, whether it be the sustainable development of small island development states, whether it be the SDGs, that is usually handled by the executive. That's the role of the executive. So the executive in our structure has the role to enter into agreements on behalf of the government and its people. The bottleneck, however, is that there's never, or really is there, discourse or a report in Parliament of the government's commitments they have entered into, thus giving the opportunity to parliamentarians to discuss. So if we're going to look at the role of Parliament in terms of the implementation of the SDGs, in the first instance, it would seem to me, I think they have a very important role to play, but it would seem to me in the first instance that they would have to have the opportunity to discuss the SDG goals. And currently in the present system, it is only the executive, because it does not go to the Parliament as an issue unless a parliamentarian raises the issue as a private member question. So the first role is, I think, when you are in opposition, I would argue that even though you're not in government, the opposition MPs have a very critical role to play if they're going to provide oversight to what the executive is doing, first to understand what's going on. And in most instances, it would appear to me that they do not follow these issues. Probably one way of overcoming that is that when we have these critical issues, it might be necessary for the executive to consider that one opposition member be given the opportunity to participate on a delegation, and or that the opposition holds the government to reporting, or the minister responsible, whether it be periodically, whether it be quarterly, whether it be every 6 months, to come to Parliament and to report on what they have gone and agree to on behalf of the government of the particular country and its member states and its people. Now, if we have that mechanism, if that structural element is dealt with, then I can see a role for Parliament as a body to really articulate these issues. If that is not there, my fear is that SDGs will not be placed on the parliamentary agenda for discussion. So the opposition might not very well, and most people on the government benches might not, even if you're not the minister responsible, have the opportunity to articulate a position on those issues. In the case of Trinidad and Tobago, it would appear as though it will be discussed in the Senate, but that is brought on the agenda by through our private members private member, resolution. So I think that modality has to be used. But I think Parliament has a very critical role to play in articulating the future for the country. But they can't play that role if they don't have a discussion on those issues and if they don't follow what's happening. So I think in the first instance, we have to solve the structural issues if the Parliament is going to play its role as oversight. I mean, we normally say that the Parliament provides the overview of the budget, but that could be a misnomer to some extent because the budget is prepared by the executive, Ministry of Finance, and presented to the Parliament. You have a discussion. I think it would appear to me again that some of these issues need to be, the committee structure within Parliament needs to be used a bit more before budget preparation so that the parliamentarians, especially the opposition, can have an input or their viewpoint at least can be reflected in the preparation of these things. So yes, I say Parliament has a very important role to play, but structurally I don't see them playing any role. Because in the Caribbean, I doubt very much, with the exception of Trinidad and Tobago, which a decision has already been made to debate the SDG goals in the Senate, the upper house, that the SDG goals will be discussed in Parliament. So even if the parliamentarians have a role, there's no opportunity. And I'm not sure that outside the Parliament, that members of Parliament in the region are sufficiently sensitive to these issues to mobilize stakeholders to have that type of discussion. So I think we really have a problem when we're talking about whether we're talking about energy sustainability. You might get some of these issues being addressed by Parliament if there's a, say, for example, a bill on energy or a bill on coastal and marine resources. Then you might get some of these issues being addressed. But basically, the structures are not there, or if the structures are there, they're not used to bring these issues to the table. I feel very strongly, personal view, that if resources are used for the executive to participate internationally in finalizing agreements, etc., I think they have a responsibility, in my view, on return to bring those. The minister has a responsibility to return to the country and at the appropriate time inform Parliament of the commitments. Currently, that does not happen. So yes, they have a role, but if we don't deal with the structural issues, I really don't see them playing any meaningful role.